Behind the dusty tavern, bound to a rotting wooden post, a small figure swayed in the scorching heat. Her slender arms stretched overhead like a forgotten scarecrow, feet bare and caked with dried mud. The tattered cotton gown hung from her frail frame like discarded cloth, while thick rope carved angry welts into her wrists with every movement. She couldn't have been more than 12, perhaps even younger, gaunt as a willow branch and silent as morning mist. Her identity remained unknown to all who passed. No one bothered to inquire. The gathering crowd around her jeered, wagered, and spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Most hadn't come for her. They sought the poker tables inside, the women upstairs, the burning whiskey. Yet when a child stands, chained before the town's sole drinking establishment, curiosity stirs in some hearts, fury in others, and something darker awakens in the worst of men. One such individual lounged against a splintered rail, gnawing dried meat while peering through. Swirling dust clouds. "Poker player's offspring," he mumbled. "In debt to half the territory, trading her flesh to settle what his cards can't cover." His tone carried no shock. Neither did anyone else's. Then the breeze shifted, and through the haze emerged a horseman, sitting tall in his saddle, weather-beaten hat, threadbare jacket, and eyes that rarely needed to blink twice. His name was Jesse James, 40 winters old, childless, running a spread that demanded he tear himself apart each dawn just to hold it together. Jesse hadn't planned on visiting town. He'd come simply to sharpen old implements, perhaps gather a few necessities. But passing the narrow alley, he glimpsed her. Hollow cheeks, trembling limbs fighting to stay upright. His mount halted without command. He remained motionless for long moments, jaw clenched, reins loose, observing and listening. A booming voice pierced the air. $12 for the child. 7 days' work or lifetime ownership, your choice. She's slight, but her appetite's modest. The girl kept her gaze downward. The gambler, lean, rank-smelling, teeth missing from his crooked grin, swaggered toward the post and yanked the rope as if inspecting livestock. She handles cleaning, laundering, basic cooking. Tougher than her appearance suggests, and simple-minded as a stump. Won't give you sass. Nobody stirred. The crowd drifted away, losing interest. Too brutal a spectacle even for this settlement. Then Jesse dismounted. He avoided looking at the gambler, spoke no words, simply reached into his coat and withdrew, a wrapped fabric bundle. Inside, metal coins clinked together. The gambler's eyes narrowed with suspicion. 15, Jesse stated. The gambler's eyebrows rose. You want her for the week? No, forever. Jesse hesitated briefly. Then I'm not purchasing her, just clearing your obligation. The gambler chuckled darkly. Makes no difference to me. He tossed the rope into the dirt like refuse. She belongs to you now. Jesse remained silent. He approached, knelt down, and severed her bonds with his folding knife. Her arms dropped too quickly. She stumbled forward, and he steadied her, not gently, but without roughness. She glanced up momentarily, startled, then quickly looked away. No tears fell, only vacant, hollow eyes that had long since stopped hoping for compassion. They departed town beneath gathering storm clouds. She didn't ride behind him. He allowed her the mule alone, its leads secured loosely to his horse. She gripped the saddle horn until her knuckles went white, keeping her face turned from the trail. Dust swirled behind them like restless spirits, refusing to stay buried. Jesse James's homestead lay 10 miles westward, nestled between twin stone ridges and bordered by bare cottonwood trees stripped for winter. The barn sagged from the previous storm's damage, its roof still leaking from the one before. Chickens roamed freely. A fence post tilted crookedly near the entrance gate. Jesse hadn't found time to repair it. The girl absorbed everything without comment. He guided her into the modest main house, small and austere. A pot of beans simmered on the stove, the sole source of warmth in the room. A wool blanket lay folded on the cot beside the hearth. He gestured toward it. "This is yours." She stood frozen in place. "Are you hungry?" She nodded once. He spooned beans into a dented tin bowl and placed it on the table. She sat, but didn't touch the utensil, just stared as if she'd never seen one before. "No need to rush your eating," he said more softly. She lifted the spoon carefully, avoiding spills. When she tasted the food, something flickered across her. Expression, not from heat, but from actual flavor. He realized then that she'd never experienced the simple pleasure of warm food consumed while seated. She couldn't finish it all, simply whispered, "Thank you," in a voice that seemed to emerge from beneath floorboards. He asked no questions, shared no stories. He merely lit an oil lamp, checked the fire, and said, "No doors get locked here. You're protected now." She nodded again, but remained motionless. He stepped outside to tend the mule. Darkness fell swiftly, and sharp wind cut through the canyon. Coyotes howled somewhere beyond the ridge. Jesse gazed up at the stars, wondering what burden he'd just invited into his world. When he returned inside, she slept curled on the cot, arms wrapped tightly around, herself as if still bound to something invisible. At midnight, a floorboard groaned. Jesse awoke in his chair, hand instinctively finding the rifle beside him. The girl stood there, eyes glassy with fear. "Please don't lock me in the barn," she whispered. He lowered the weapon. "I won't." "I've been imprisoned before," she figured. Silence stretched between them. She returned to her cot, curled up again. Neither of them slept the remainder of the night. Morning brought frost coating the window pane. The sun rose blood orange behind the ridge, casting elongated shadows across the kitchen floor. Jesse poured water into the kettle, his hand trembling, slightly. He blamed the cold. Outside, a hawk circled overhead. Inside, the girl remained on her cot, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Jesse James didn't know her history, didn't need to. He'd witnessed enough men commit worse acts with less justification. All he understood was that her first request wasn't for food or identity. It was not to be confined. Perhaps that knowledge was sufficient for now. She rose with the sunrise, though Jesse hadn't specified when to wake. No bell summoned her. No voice commanded. Just the natural rhythm of someone accustomed to punishment for guessing wrong. The quilt had slipped partially off during sleep, yet she hadn't stirred to adjust it. She lay still, eyes open, breathing quietly, as if uncertain whether the warmth was genuine. Jesse was already outdoors, splitting kindling beside the shed. His coat hung from one shoulder, and each axe strike echoed through the canyon like a challenge to the cold. The girl stood at the porch threshold, uncertain whether to request permission or simply move forward. She chose neither approach. When he noticed her, he simply jerked his chin toward the chicken coop. "The hens need feeding. Grain's in that sack there." She went without a word, barefoot across the frost-bitten grass. By the time he finished stacking wood, she'd returned, hands reddened from cold, straw bits clinging to her skirt. He half expected a complaint. She offered none. She simply took a seat on the steps, knees drawn to her chest, eyes on the road as if watching for someone to reclaim her. They remained silent until breakfast. Jesse had a weekly baking ritual, though his bread typically emerged hard as roof, shingles. This time it was still warm, crust golden, the aroma filling the tiny house like something sacred. He placed a piece on her plate beside a dollop of honey and watched while pretending not to observe. She didn't move. "You can eat that," he said. She looked at him uncertainly. "All of it." He paused. "That's what it's there for." Her hands hovered over the bread as if it might disappear with wrong handling. She tore off a small piece, slowly brought it to her lips, then stopped. "Should I save some for later?" He leaned back, letting his chair creak under his weight. "There'll be more later." She stared at him with disbelief. He didn't press the matter, just rose, poured himself coffee, and gazed out the window as if the landscape might answer the ache he couldn't identify. After breakfast, she swept the floor 3 times despite it being clean. She scrubbed the stove's black iron surface until it gleamed like polished metal. She refolded her blanket twice before evening fell. Jesse attempted to tell her it wasn't necessary, but each time he opened his mouth, her eyes went wide with the look of someone bracing for violence that never came. "She doesn't know what to make of warm bread," he muttered to himself that night. Or silence. Over the following week, they established a pattern. Not comfort, exactly, just routine. She followed him when he inspected fence lines, keeping pace as best she could. When she stumbled over loose rocks and scraped her knee, she gritted her teeth and continued walking. He stopped, offered her a cloth, and said, "No shame in being hurt." She only nodded, wiping away blood in silence. On the 4th evening, he found her outside by the barn, curled beneath a wheelbarrow. Not sleeping, just hiding. When he asked her purpose, she whispered, "Just checking." Checking for what? If the door locks from the outside? He crouched beside her, voice low. "It doesn't. Nothing here does." She didn't respond, but the next night she slept closer to the fire. 1 week passed, then another. The neighbors began talking. "Who's the girl?" asked Hank Sutter, pausing at the well with his horse. Jesse answered with a glance. "None of your business." Sutter raised an eyebrow. "Not saying it is. Just strikes me as odd." "Odd doesn't mean wrong," Jesse replied, then walked away. By the 3rd week, she'd begun humming, barely audible only when she thought he wasn't nearby. A simple tune, off-key but steady, like a bird just learning its voice. Jesse pretended not to notice. She didn't inquire about his wife. The grave behind the barn bore no marker, only a stone with weather-softened edges. One morning, the girl left a flower there, a single dandelion, crushed and dry from the season, but placed gently. Later, he asked, "Do you miss someone?" She didn't answer. But that night she whispered, "I had a brother, had." She said nothing more. Spring was attempting to claw its way forward. Snow had vanished from the ridge and birds had returned, their calls echoing through the cottonwoods. One morning, she discovered a robin's egg cracked open in the grass. She picked it up and brought it inside, cradling the blue shell like fragile glass. Jesse watched her from the porch and thought, "She's been broken too, but she still handles things gently." The first time she laughed was accidental. Jesse had burned the cornbread black as coal. He muttered under his breath, "That loaf died for nothing." She tried maintaining a straight face, but a snort escaped before she could suppress it. Then she froze, hand clapped over her mouth. Jesse didn't laugh in return, but he smiled. "About time. Thought maybe you'd forgotten how." She ducked her head, still grinning behind her palm. They had only one visitor that month, a traveling tinker who'd once played cards with Jesse in better times. He noticed the girl immediately. "Hired help?" he asked. "No," Jesse said simply. The man grunted. "Not your kin either." Jesse turned to her. "Go inside, would you?" She obeyed. When the man looked back, Jesse's voice was iron. "You don't ask about her again. She ain't my concern." Exactly. That night she sat at the table longer than usual. Finally she asked, "Will you sell me back?" Jesse blinked. "What?" "Men buy girls, then sell them again. That's how it works." He set his coffee down. "That's not what happened here." She tilted her head. "Then what was it?" He searched for words, taking time to find them. "I think I saw someone drowning. And maybe I was too, so I pulled you out." "And me?" He paused. "You pulled me out too." She didn't answer, but she never asked again. On the 12th night, she handed him a folded paper. "What's this?" he asked. "My name. You already told me." Not the real one. He unfolded the paper. 4 letters, shaky and small, but written like a promise. Lena. Jessie said nothing for a long time, just nodded. "All right then, Lena." She beamed as if she'd just been granted permission to exist. The next morning, Lena brought in kindling, poured coffee, and set 2 plates without being told. When Jessie sat down, he found a slice of warm bread on his plate, not from him, from her. She watched him take the first bite. He chewed slowly, looked up, and raised an eyebrow. "Little dry," she grinned. "You didn't complain about mine." He laughed for the first time since his wife passed. Outside, the wind carried birdsong through the hills. Inside, the fire burned steady. And for the first time in years, Jesse James didn't eat breakfast alone, not in his belly and not in his bones. The wind turned vicious the morning they arrived. Jesse sensed something was wrong before dust even rose on the road. Birds fell silent. The air carried that tense, waiting quality, as if the land itself held its breath. He was chopping wood when the dog growled low and steady, ears flattened against its skull. Jesse straightened, wiped his palms on his trousers, and looked east. 3 riders approached slowly, deliberately slow, the kind that meant they didn't need to hurry because they expected everyone else to wait. Lena was inside washing beans. She hadn't seen them yet. Jesse didn't call out to her. The men dismounted. Before reaching the gate, the first wore a preacher's collar, stiff and clean despite the ride. His eyes held no warmth. The second was a lawman, badge crooked, mustache trimmed too precisely. And the third, well, Jesse didn't need a name for him. The eyes were enough. Sharp, cold, and calculating. He bore the gambler's smirk and the same jawline, too. "Morning," Jesse said, voice level. The preacher stepped forward. "Mr. Boone." "That's right. I'm Reverend Hatch. This here's Deputy Slater, and that man's Mr. Caleb Dawes." Jesse nodded once, slowly. "What brings you here?" Caleb Dawes spat in the dirt. "My brother sold you something he had no right to." Jesse didn't blink. "He sold me nothing. Girl was chained to a post behind the saloon. I gave him coin to cut her, free." Deputy Slater cleared his throat. "That coin didn't absolve anything. Legally, she's property settled through wager. There's documentation." "She's not a mule," Jesse said. "She's a child." Reverend Hatch folded his hands as if in prayer, but his words came sharp. "We're not here to debate philosophy. You're harboring stolen property under your roof. Unless you produce proof of guardianship, the child will be returned." Jesse felt something dark flicker behind his ribs. Not rage yet, just cold certainty that these men had come with predetermined minds. She's safer here than anywhere else. She eats, sleeps, isn't chained, isn't afraid. That doesn't make it legal, the deputy said. Lena had stepped onto the porch without sound. Her hair was braided, sleeves rolled up, apron smudged with flour. She looked small in the doorway, but she held herself like stone. Caleb's eyes found her and curved into a smile that made Jesse's stomach turn. "Lena," the preacher said smoothly, "come here now. We'll take you home. This man's done his part." She didn't move. "Girl," Caleb growled, "you belong to our family. You were promised." Jesse stepped between them. "She's not going anywhere." Deputy Slater's hand twitched near his hip. "You sure you want to make this official, Boone? You really want to be on record as obstructing the law?" Jesse glanced back at Lena. Her eyes weren't scared now. They were hard. They said she didn't need saving anymore. "You have 7 days," Jesse said. "Come back with papers or don't come back at all." Reverend Hatch's jaw tightened. "The Lord frowns upon stubbornness in the face of justice." Jesse didn't answer. The three men mounted up again. Dust swallowed them as quickly as it brought them. But the tension didn't leave with their horses. Lena spoke first. "They'll return, won't they?" "Yes. Then we have 7 days." She turned and walked back inside as if she'd just added it to the list between feeding the hens and sweeping the porch. That night, Jesse couldn't sleep. He sat in the rocker near the fire, watching the flames jump like nervous hearts. He thought of his wife, her gentleness, the quiet way she had healed things with tea and silence. Lena was nothing like her, and maybe that's what made this feel like something new, not a replacement but a reckoning. Lena stayed up too, reading from an old hymnal, mouthing the words but not singing them. At one point, she whispered, "If they come back and take me, what'll you do?" He didn't look at her, just said, "Depends how loud you scream." The week passed too quickly. Jesse sent a telegram to a lawyer in Junction Bluff, an old Army friend who'd once owed him a favor. But law moved slowly out here, slower than horses, and he knew better than to hope for papers before the deadline. On the 4th day, he taught Lena how to hold the rifle. "Not to shoot nobody," he said, "but to feel the weight, to know you're not helpless." She nodded and cradled it like a newborn calf, not fearfully but carefully. On the 5th, they rebuilt part of the fence together. Her hands blistered. She didn't complain. On the 6th, she asked to sleep outside. "Just for one night, so I'll know what to do if I have to run again." Jesse laid out a blanket beside her under the stars. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The 7th morning came pale and windless, the kind of calm that only appeared before something shattered. A wagon creaked up the road just after sunrise. Not the law, not the preacher, but a woman. Skin darkened by sun, eyes sunken, voice rough as gravel. She stepped down slowly, leaning on a carved cane. When she saw Lena, she dropped the cane. "Mama," Lena whispered, her voice barely more than breath. Jesse froze. The woman was no older than 30, but she looked 60 from grief. She fell to her knees before Lena and clutched her so tightly the girl gasped. "I thought you were dead," the woman cried. "I told them I'd come back. I told them not to hurt you." "They sold me," Lena said softly. "I know," her mother choked. "I came back, but they told me you'd gone. They lied." Jesse stepped away, unsure where he belonged in this moment. But Lena turned to him. "This is my mama." He nodded. "I figured." Her mother stood on shaky legs. "I have a shack near Cotton Bend. Nothing much, but it's ours. I came to bring her home." Jesse studied her. Ragged dress, thin shoes, bruised arms. She looked like a ghost trying to remember how to live. Lena looked up at him, waiting. He didn't speak, didn't need to. Lena walked to her mother, took her hand, then turned to Jesse. "Will you come with us? Just for a little. Help us get the place safe." His throat felt tight. "That's your home." She stepped forward, closed her small hand around his weathered one. "It's yours too," she said. The wagon rolled out by noon. 3 souls, 1 second chance, and somewhere on the trail behind them, the preacher's words scattered in the dust and meant nothing. But the sound of a girl calling a man family for the first time, that would echo across the plains forever. They traveled slowly, not because the mule was tired, but because trust takes time and no one wanted to spook it. The road to Cotton Bend wound through scrubland where trees grew gnarled and low, clinging to red dirt like they'd survived storms that tried to yank them clean out. Lena rode in the wagon's back with a blanket around her shoulders and her mother, asleep beside her, head tilted, mouth open from exhaustion. Jesse walked beside the mule, hand on the reins, boots dragging slightly in the dust. He hadn't meant to travel this far, but when Lena asked, he couldn't refuse. He never really could. Not since that night she whispered, "Don't lock me in the barn." The shack appeared near sunset, a slant-roof structure leaning against a rock ridge, walls patched with tin and timber that had seen too many winters. Smoke from a tiny chimney curled upward, lazy and blue. A bent windmill creaked nearby, and the smell of pine sap hung thick in the air. "That it?" Jessie asked. Lena nodded, but her mother, Mara, stared ahead as if she'd just remembered every breath she'd ever taken inside those walls. They reached the door. It groaned open with a shove. Inside was better than Jessie expected, swept clean with a small table and one cot. A few jars lined a shelf. He saw a child's drawing tacked to the wall with a rusty nail, a woman, a girl, and what looked like a red house. The red had bled with time, like a memory stretched too thin. "She kept this," Lena whispered. Her mother smiled weakly. "It was the only thing I could carry for a while." Jessie helped start the fire, gathered dry wood, lit it with his flint, and fed it gently until it crackled. He didn't speak much. He knew when to give people silence, and this house was full of it. That night, Lena cooked beans and flatbread. Her mother dozed, waking only to murmur that the bread smelled like home. Jessie slept outside. In the morning, the wind shifted again. He smelled smoke, not cooking smoke, but wildfire. He bolted upright and saw the ridge to the west glowing faintly orange, like an ember flickering before it remembers its flame. He ran to the shack. Lena was already outside, barefoot, staring at the horizon. "It's moving," she said. Jessie scanned the trees. "Wind's pulling it east. If it jumps the canyon, it'll be on us before dusk." Mara stumbled out behind them, coughing. "What do we do?" "We run," Jessie said, but Lena didn't move. She was staring at the tiny shed beside the shack. Mama's things are in there. My books, her papers. Jessie glanced at the sky. "Not worth your life." Lena looked at her mother. "What if we don't get back?" Mara's face crumpled. Jessie made the choice for them. "I'll get it. You ready, the mule?" Lena opened her mouth to protest, but he was already moving. The shed was secured with a bent nail. Jessie ripped it off with his knife and shoved the door open. Inside, a trunk, some old linens, a wrapped bundle of dried herbs. He grabbed what he could, stuffed them into his coat, and sprinted back as the first ash drifted down. By afternoon, the fire had crowned the ridge. Trees screamed as they burned. Smoke wrapped the valley like a closing fist. They rode out just in time. Behind them, the ridge burned red, angry, alive, consuming everything. Mara wept. Lena didn't. She watched it burn and said quietly, "It took everything again." Jessie looked at her. "Not everything." They rode until they reached a creek where the water still ran clear and cold. They camped there, made coffee from the last of the grounds, and said little. That night, Lena sat beside Jessie, their backs against a rock still warm from the day. "I thought if we came here, maybe something would heal," she said. "It did," he answered. She turned. "How can you say that? The fire took it all." "Fire burns what's dead," Jessie said. "But it doesn't kill what's already living." Lena blinked slowly, like she was taking that in word by word. "I kept thinking this place would fix things," she whispered. "That I'd see Mama in her home and something would feel right. But all I saw was what we lost." He nodded. "That doesn't mean it's not worth remembering. But you don't have to live in it." She didn't answer, but when he stood to walk back toward the fire, she followed without hesitation. In the morning, they returned to the remains of the shack. The walls were blackened, one side caved in, but something caught Lena's eye near the stump out front. A book, slightly scorched but intact. She picked it up, dusted it off. Inside was her drawing, untouched. She held it to her chest and smiled for the first time in days. "Guess fire didn't win everything," she said. "No," Jessie said. "Not even close." As they packed the mule again, Mara leaned on Jessie's arm a little longer than needed. You didn't have to do all this, she said. No, but I'm glad I did. She studied him. You ever think about making something permanent again? He didn't answer right away. But Lena looked between them, quiet, hopeful, the way only someone who'd known loss could be. Jesse placed the book in the saddlebag. Let's get home first. Then we'll see what still wants to grow. They turned toward the road. Behind them, the ridge still smoldered. But ahead, the wind smelled like rain. By the time they made it back to the ranch, the fence was gone. Jesse stared at the smoldering posts. Charred wood still hissed beneath the ash like the ground itself was grieving. The wind carried a bitter scent of oil, scorched rope, and rage. This wasn't wildfire, it was human, measured, meant. Lena stepped down from the mule slowly. Her mother clutched the saddle, trembling from the road, eyes wide with dread she couldn't voice. But Lena, 12 years old, feet blistered, heart stitched from scraps, just stood there. Not afraid, not surprised. Jesse walked the perimeter in silence. Boot prints everywhere, at least 3 men. He could tell by the depth of the prints that one of them limped, Caleb Dawes. They had waited, watched, and when no one was home, they'd made their move. Inside the house, furniture was overturned. Jesse's wife's rocking chair had been hacked apart with a hatchet. The rifle was gone, his ledger too, and scrawled on the door with charcoal was one word: thief. Mara covered her mouth, but Lena stepped forward, fingers grazing the black letters. They want us scared, she said. That's all this is. Jesse looked at her, really looked. There was something in her now, something forged in the red glow of the ridge, something that wouldn't be broken again. The girl who once whispered, "Don't lock me in the barn," was gone. What stood in her place was steel. We're not running again, she said. Jesse nodded. No, we're not. They started fixing things by first clearing the wreckage. Mara gathered the chairs upright and swept glass into a bucket. Lena untied what was left of the hay bundles and spread them to dry. Jesse rebuilt the front step by sunset, each nail driven down with purpose. That night, they slept in shifts. Jesse kept the shotgun across his lap. Mara leaned against the wall with a blade tucked in her sleeve. Lena didn't sleep. She just sat near the fire, watching the door like it might breathe. At dawn, someone knocked. Not heavy, just steady. Jesse answered with the shotgun raised. On the porch stood Hank Sutter. He didn't flinch. Word's gotten around, Hank said. Some men think you took what wasn't yours. Some others think you saved her life. I know which I believe. Jesse lowered the gun. I brought nails, Hank added, holding up a sack and planks. We're going to need a few more hands if we're patching that fence. Behind him, 3 more neighbors waited. One held wire, another had stew. Mara stepped forward, hesitant. Hank tipped his hat. Ma'am. Lena stayed on the porch, arms folded, watching. Always watching. By noon, a dozen people were at work. Someone brought fresh water from the well. Someone else offered blankets. No one asked questions. They just built. Caleb Dawes rode in near sundown. He didn't come with a badge or preacher, just himself and the sour grin that had once made girls flinch. Looks like you have a party, he said, dismounting slowly. Jesse didn't reach for the shotgun this time. He walked toward him, steady. Caleb spat. You think this changes anything? She's still marked property. You have no papers. She's not property, Jesse said. Caleb laughed. You going to marry her, Mama? Make it legal that way? You really want a burned-out widow and a stubborn brat for your trouble? Lena stepped down from the porch. She didn't speak. She slapped Caleb across the face so hard the sound echoed through the hills. The men stopped working. No one spoke. Caleb's cheek burned red. You don't get to talk about my mother, Lena said, voice quiet but deadly clear. And I don't belong to you, Caleb sneered. Little Wildcat thinks she's grown. Jesse stepped beside her. She's not wild. She's brave. That's more than I can say for a man who only shows up when the fire's out. Caleb's hand hovered near his belt, but too many men stood behind Jesse now. Too many eyes watching. He didn't. Draw. He mounted his horse. You'll regret this. No, Jesse said. I won't. Caleb turned and rode off without looking back. When he was gone, Lena turned to Jesse, chest rising and falling fast. Her hands still shook. I was scared, she admitted. I know, but you didn't run. No, he said. You didn't. That night, they ate together by the fire. The stew was warm, the bread soft, and when Mara sang a lullaby from some long-ago memory, Lena rested her head on her shoulder without flinching. Jesse watched them. Something deep in his chest uncurled. For the first time in years, he let himself lean back in the chair and close his eyes, just for a minute, without fearing what might come in the dark. Later, as the fire burned low, Lena looked up at him. Do you think I'm still broken? He didn't answer right away. He walked to the old cabinet, pulled out his wife's carving knife, and handed it to her. It's not about being broken, he said. It's about what you do after. She took it gently, the blade gleaming in the firelight. And then she smiled, not because she was fixed, but because she wasn't hiding anymore. In time, people forgot how she got there. They remembered her bread, her stories, her stubbornness. And when she rode into town years later with her own wagon, with her own name on the ledger, no one called her wild. They called her Boone, because names are earned. And fire? Fire only changes everything if something new is waiting in the ash. This story isn't just about rescue. It's about what comes after. And if you're lucky, like Jesse James was, the person you save might just save you right back.